And thank you for joining us. I'm Aubrey Phillips with Pinellas County's Office of Management and Budget. I'm overseeing CARES program coordination on behalf of the county and will be facilitating today's virtual media event along with Kelsey Grenzer from Pinellas County Marketing Communications. First off, before we get started, just a quick reminder, this is a virtual event. So if you'd like to ask a question, you can raise your hand or type it in the Q&A chat box that should be at the bottom of your screen. If you are joining us by phone and would like to raise your hand, use *9 on your touch-tone phone to respond and raise your hand, and we'll call on those questions and respond to the Q&A at the end after some opening remarks from our panelists today. So here joining us, in addition to myself and Kelsey, our Commission Chair, Pat Gerard, and Lindsay Carson, CEO of the Early Learning Coalition, and Duggan Cooley, the CEO of the Pinellas Community Foundation. Lindsay and Duggan are our partners on these programs, and I'll hand it over to the Chair, Pat Gerard, for some welcoming comments.
Okay, thank you. First, I want to thank our media partners and our fellow participants in this project for joining us today. Here in Pinellas County, we've been working very hard to support our community in this time of pandemic. One significant way that we've been doing that is through the federal CARES program. At the county, we've developed several financial assistance programs to distribute these funds to our residents and businesses. Today, we're launching two new programs along the same lines. The first one is the Pinellas CARES Nonprofit Partnership Grant or Fund. The second one is the Pinellas CARES Child Care Provider Grant. The Nonprofit Partnership Fund will run in partnership with the Pinellas Community Foundation, which you'll hear a bit about in a minute. The program will have $29.7 million allotted to help eligible nonprofits cover increased demand for supplies and programs from the impacts of COVID-19. The Child Care Provider Grant will run in partnership with the Early Learning Coalition of Pinellas County. The program has $4.6 million allotted to eligible child care organizations in Pinellas County. The Board of County Commissioners is really proud to support these programs. We appreciate all the hard work on the part of our staff and now our partners as our community continues to manage and recover from the COVID-19 hardships. And right now I want to turn it over to Duggan Cooley of the Pinellas Community Foundation, followed by Lindsay Carson from the Early Learning Coalition, who will share more details about their respective programs. Duggan?
Thank you very much. The Pinellas CARES Nonprofit Partnership Fund is designed to address the needs of our most vulnerable residents whose health and well-being has been impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. And as Chair Gerard indicated, the Pinellas Community Foundation has been given $29.7 million to augment nonprofit response efforts, providing critical care to our community's residents. The funds will be available to nonprofits beginning in an application process that opens at 9 a.m. tomorrow and will help address priorities, giving greater access to food so that we can address the sudden increase in food insecure households, also addressing the needs of behavioral health so that our community can promote good mental health and resiliency in light of increased isolation and stress. And then also helping with housing stability by providing legal aid services to help folks who are facing the challenges of evictions. These funds are only available to nonprofit organizations recognized as 501c3s. The funds can only be used to address identified needs that are COVID-19 related. And organizations that receive funding will need to spend all of the funds by the end of the year, December 30th, to be in compliance with the CARES Act. We've worked closely with the county on the priorities for this fund. The foundation will be executing this program in a very open and transparent way. Application, accountability, and reporting is all available through our foundation's website, pinellascf.org/cares. That will be the central location for that. And we will be using involved community committees to vet applicants and make determinations for funding. If there are members of the media who want to better understand how these funds are going to make a difference, we're happy to set up interviews with agencies that were recipients of our Tampa Bay Resiliency Fund that operated in partnership with other local funders, and recipients from that funding whose programming matches eligibility for the Pinellas Cares Nonprofit Partnership Fund. We'd be happy to get you in connection with those agencies so you can see how this funding can be put to work to augment incredible work that's already happening in our community. And so I'd like to turn it now to Lindsay Carson to talk about the new program that will be operated through the Early Learning Coalition.
Thank you. There it
There we
goes.
go.
Good afternoon. I'm Lindsay Carson. And first, I'd like to thank Pinellas County government and the Board of County Commissioners for recognizing and supporting the essential work of our child care providers. Pinellas is home to 374 child care centers and 276 family child care homes. These are small businesses that are caring for children, preparing them for kindergarten, all while parents are able to work. While many of our child care centers closed early on at the start of the pandemic, they soon reopened, and those that haven't yet opened mostly are about to open along with the public schools as we get back to that. Our child care providers have been continually dedicated to serving our children, caring for the children of first responders and other essential workers through this entire pandemic. The child care providers have voluntarily put in place additional health and safety standards, including smaller group sizes, which has a very significant fiscal impact, along with isolated groups and curbside drop-offs, extensive cleaning and sanitation practices, child screenings, all to protect our children so that they can remain safe while parents are able to go back to work. Those elements certainly come at a cost. At the same time, many of our families have chosen to keep their children home for various reasons, and we're seeing a reduction in enrollment. So providers are spending more to operate and receiving less in revenue. The loss of revenue coupled with this increase puts us in a vulnerable position in terms of potential shortages of capacity. So the opportunity to partner with Pinellas County to offer these grants is phenomenal for our child care provider community so that they can continue to operate and care. Our program is designed specifically to support open, licensed, and license exempt facilities in Pinellas County. Grants will vary depending on their licensed capacity. It's commensurate with their size and range from $4,000 to $10,000 each. As those providers that are closed begin to reopen, there will still be opportunity to help jumpstart them with the grants as well. In total, we expect to expend about $4.6 million to help underpin our childcare industry in Pinellas County. The Early Learning Coalition has a direct relationship with these providers as we partner to offer care all the time. And so we've partnered with the county to assist providers in their application process and navigating these waters to make it as simple as possible for our providers to access these resources during a challenging time. And anybody who is interested in talking with a provider, we would be certainly happy to help set up interviews so you can better understand the impact of COVID and childcare and how this opportunity helps to support our childcare providers.
Thank you so much, Lindsay and Duggan and Chair Gerard for those comments. We will open it up now for questions first about our nonprofit program. So if Duggan, you'd like to turn your video back on and hop back on with us. And if you have any questions, you can again raise your hand or type a question in the Q&A box, which should be towards the bottom of your screen on Zoom. If you're joining us by phone, it's *9 to raise your hand. I'm not seeing any hands or questions come up. Are there any questions on the child care program? All right. Well, if there's no additional questions, is there anything else that Daisy or Doug, or I'm sorry, Lindsay or Duggan, that you'd like to cover, or Chair Gerard, any closing comments that you would like to make? Otherwise, we'll wrap up today's session. Oh, I see Tracy McManus has her hand raised, and one question just came in on the Q&A chat. Tracy, if you can unmute yourself, I'm allowing you to talk, and then you can unmute yourself and.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I just wanted to see if someone, maybe Chair Gerard, could clarify with the 170 million that was allocated last month to the local businesses and public health programs and the families. With this $34 million allocation, how much more CARES Act funding does Pinellas County have to distribute?
Would you like me to speak to that, Chair?
Sure. I will say, though, we didn't allocate all the 170 million last week. That was the amount of money that we received from the federal government to do a variety of things related to the pandemic, including buying PPE and helping hire nurses and that sort of thing. So only a portion of it is going to social services and childcare. So.
Yes.
So businesses, for that matter.
The remainder of the $170 million has been identified for other programs as well as laid out and adopted by the board. As you might expect, we're monitoring the situation and keeping the board apprised as we move forward in making actual allocations of these funds. The next program to launch being funded by this $170 million will be our local business programs. We're working to bring those together and make sure that it's an easy application process for local businesses. We know that they're feeling a lot of information overload with the number of programs and assistance things out there. So we've really taken the time to make sure that it's a easy process for local businesses that are being impacted and that have either been forced to close or that have had their customers close. So is this $34 million part of the $170 million? Yes, Tracy, that is correct. This is a portion of that $170 million.
Okay. Can you still hear me?
I can.
Okay. Can you guys just be more specific? Can you give examples about how you expect these nonprofits to use the funding? I guess I'm a little more clear with the child care. That would obviously go towards like operating expenses, but the nonprofits, what types of things do you expect them to spend the money on?
Sure, I'd be happy to answer that. And so the major categories for funding are food, behavioral health, and legal aid for housing. And so in the world of food and emergency food, doing more to bring emergency food to the community, raising the amount of food that our food banks and food pantries have available. Many of them have struggled keeping food on the shelves and staying stocked. So this will help them augment that. Helping do things like additional home delivered meals for people who are better served at home for health and safety reasons would be another example of how an organization could use the food money. In the world of behavioral health, doing things to increase the accessibility of behavioral health services, maybe that's through upgrading technology to expand telehealth capacity, or providing technology to people who can't access some of the new telehealth provisions from our behavioral health providers. Maybe they don't have access to that technology or Wi-Fi even. Expanding the services and access to behavioral health services for some of our frontline workers is another example of how an organization may do specific outreach utilizing the funding. Our legal aid agencies have been on the front line of gearing up for an increase in evictions. And so this funding could be used to augment and grow the availability of legal aid services so that residents can understand their rights or work to negotiate the end to an eviction proceeding so that they can remain stably housed. So those are examples. We have more on our pinellascf.org/cares site, examples of funding But as long as the agency is doing things in the world of food, behavioral health, and then legal aid and housing, we ask them to be innovative in how they propose their ideas to us. But we are ensuring that what they are proposing and the expenses they have are in line with the CARES Act, and are appropriate. The expenditures are appropriately documented to guarantee that the services were provided and in line with federal requirements.
Can nonprofits use this money for like utilities and paying staff?
So they could, and as part of the budget that they will submit as a piece of their application to the foundation, they will need to outline all the expenditures associated with the program that they're proposing. It is designed to augment and increase programming. You cannot use these funds for revenue replacement. You can't use them in place of other federal funds that are supporting a program right now. The funds are really designed to increase the availability of programming and services. And so organizations will have to detail how they're doing that through their application. And we do imagine that many of them will be doing that through increased staff, and especially in the behavioral health focus area, or increased access to contract services, so contract therapists or otherwise, to augment existing services.
One last question, sorry. How quickly do you expect these funds to be distributed once the applications are approved?
So the applications launch tomorrow, and we are finishing up 2 different committees that the foundation will have meeting. And those committees will meet, each committee will meet every other week. So there will be a committee that is meeting weekly and making determinations on a weekly basis. And with the goal of the first decisions to be made about 10 to 14 days after the first application is received by the foundation, and then weekly on a rolling basis until all the funds are allocated.
Thanks.
And in the case of the child care grants, because that is a little distinct, we've worked with Early Learning Coalition, and Lindsay and her staff have been tremendous partners to review and pre-qualify those licensed child care facilities. So once they apply, we will just compare that to make sure that they are one of the pre-qualified child care providers, and that payment would be processed within 10 business days, or 10 calendar days, excuse me.
And Tracy, I just wanted to add, all of these funds need to be expended by the end of the year. So these guys are on a fast track. And I will say, particularly with the nonprofit partnership, that the Board of County Commissioners really tasks staff to step it up and make sure that these funds were getting out. We've had a program for several months, and it's been very restrictive in terms of just paying late rent and late utility bills. And a lot of times that's not what the need is, or it's not the only need by any means. So this will help a lot, being able to flesh out that assistance. So we want to thank Duggan and Lindsay.
Yes, and the lead up to developing these programs, we did pretty extensive public input from the community, and that was exactly what we heard, that yes, it was great to have assistance for rent and utilities, but there were still a lot of unmet needs around feeding, and we knew that nonprofit partners out in the community were stepping up to help fill those needs. We want to make sure they continue to have capacity to meet those needs as the COVID impacts continue. If anyone else has any questions, you can raise your hand now or type it in the Q&A chat. We'll give just a moment to see if there's any other questions before we wrap up. All right, wonderful. Well, thank you for joining us, Chair Gerard, Duggan Cooley, from CEO of the Pinellas Community Foundation, Lindsay Carson, CEO of the Early Learning Coalition. And thank you, members of the media, for joining us for today's virtual media event.